I what I would like to do is just piggyback off of what the doc was just speaking about, and it'll tie into that in some respect. Because what she made me think about was concentrated poverty, not just poverty, I mean, but concentrated poverty. That's an experience that's unique to Black and brown people in this society, concentrated poverty. I mean, we have more poor white people than any other group for the obvious reasons. There's more white people, and we live in a capitalist society, but they don't experience concentrated poverty in the way we do. I grew up in the Bronx. Right around the corner from the tenement building that I lived in is Claremont Housing Projects. You know, each building has about 1,000 people. You could put about, in this particular housing project, there's about, because it's 21 stories high, 10 apartments on the floor, 210 apartments. It's about 1,000 people in a building. And here is about 12 buildings in an 8 square block radius. That's 12,000 people. 12,000 people living in the 8 square block radius, and the common denominator amongst them all is that they're financially poor. That experience of concentrated poverty is a Black and brown experience in the United States of America. And so I think about, as the doc was talking about housing and et cetera, and that's where policing looks completely different than protecting and serving. You concentrate poverty, and then the experience, and then the common denominator is everyone is financially poor. And then what does parenting look like in those communities for us? You're talking about a community riddled with trauma, right? And then the stresses that come with that. And then for many of us, it's about getting out, right? Because it becomes a place that we view as being infested. So it's about getting out. Not so much how do we work together within these communities. The goal many times is getting out. And the human service arena festers on that community. You know, the average family in that community can have 6, 7 case managers in their lives at one time. And so what is parenting like? When you mention Doc, the stress, you know, of parenting as a Black and brown parent. I think about that community specifically because it's a unique experience for Black and brown people that white folks don't experience. Even Native folks with the reservation and that experience, they're not concentrated, right? And that's the piece that resonates for me, and it was part of my experience growing up as a boy.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tony.
So I'll build on that just a little bit, and then talk more about my personal experience about that intersection. And I mean, just in that, it's also, you think of how the media has an impact on the narrative when it comes to support. You think of the pandemic that's going on, and how there's so many narratives between what may be framed as the haves and the have-nots, and who's deserving of resources, who's deserving of different benefits of the community, and how even that's just depicted on certain communities, and how that may be an impact on how these folks who, you know, people are people, but given where somebody is born, you know, given their color of their skin, and given all these other different factors, may determine the access that they have to health and well-being, and what resources they do have and what they don't. For me, when I'm thinking about me as an individual, and how that intersects with me, I think of personally at me. So with my oldest son, who's 8 years old, I have 50% custody of him, where, yeah, I'm his dad 100% of the time, but I only see him 50% of his time. Right. So then you think about all these different roles and identities that come into play, and me just wanting to be a great father, me thinking about, you know, one thing that actually Ms. Porter said earlier was about how, and I'm paraphrasing but adding on my own words too, where typically every day, you know, millions of people release their kids to go to school, to go to play, or just to go outside and have fun. But there's often this unspoken feeling, or it may even be a deep anxiety that, you know, for people of color, for many Black folks, they may send their child to school or outside and worry if their child is actually going to come back home. And they have to have certain conversations, like Mr. Porter said, in order to reassure that their children are educated, and that they know what the reality is for them just because of the color of their skin. And I wrote a piece a while ago called Until When, that focused on, it's a spoken word poem that emphasized, it highlighted the lives of Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, and Tamir Rice. And what it did was, you know, I reflected on my son and my life, and realized, you know, will my son be the next news story? It wasn't until those parents, you know, they were 17, 14, 12, you know, around those ages, where they may not have thought until then that their child would be the next news story. I wonder if mine will be next. So it's some of it, it's those specific types of conversations, those thoughts, those feelings that impacts who you are and how you identify as being Black, as being a man, as being a father. So it all comes into play of how we navigate and how we just view everyday life. And in many cases, it's often a weight that we carry. The last thing I'll say is that it's not like this can be turned off. You know, I've spoken to many folks when they're just like, this at the height of the racial uprising. You know, last year, you know, with the deaths of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, of so many folks that look like me. You know, my kids are looking at me, and they're seeing these folks on TV who look like their dad, whose lives are being taken, and you can't help but think, wow, I wonder what type of fears are being put in my child's their minds. What type of seeds are being planted about their father, and also when they grow up. And it's not as simple as I've heard people, oh, you know, if it gets too stressful for you, turn off the news, just watch. And I'm like, what? If I turn off the news, it doesn't stop the feeling that my people are being killed every single day. So, you know, I just wanted to share that, because that's just something I feel really strongly about when it comes to those intersecting identities.